The snow had already started to fall by the time Ryan Hale crossed the border into eastern Serbia. He hadn't planned on the trip taking this long, but delays at the airport and a missed connection left him driving through winding mountain roads at dusk, headlights flickering through thick fog that clung to the landscape like a second skin. Ryan wasn't a tourist. He wasn't even a travel vlogger. He was a documentarian with a very specific niche: historical horrors, real or imagined. His YouTube series, Buried Truths, had taken him from haunted asylums in Connecticut to abandoned tunnels beneath Paris. But this trip was different. This time, he was chasing a legend almost no one outside of the Balkans knew about: the case of Petar Blagojevic. According to dusty records from 1725, Blagojevic was a peasant from the remote village of Kisilova who died suddenly. 9 days after his death, a string of bizarre and sudden deaths occurred. Villagers claimed they saw Blagojevic return from the grave and attack them. The Austrian authorities had intervened, and in a rare historical record, his body was exhumed. The report described his corpse as unnaturally fresh, with new skin and blood at the mouth. He was staked through the heart. The official documentation made it one of the earliest vampire cases in European history, long before Dracula ever hit the printing press. That was the hook, and it had sunk deep into Ryan. He wasn't after ghosts or myths. He wanted to uncover what made people believe. What were the psychological, cultural, or environmental factors that made entire villages succumb to fear and superstition? But as the wind howled through the trees and the GPS signaled, he was just 10 minutes from Kisilova. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold crawled up his spine. The village didn't appear so much as emerge from the darkness. Just a few crooked houses, a rusting church steeple, and a square with no streetlights. His rental car sputtered to a stop as he parked in front of a faded wooden sign that read, Kisilova, in peeling Cyrillic letters. Not a soul in sight. Not a single dog barking. Just silence. He checked his phone. No service. Perfect, he muttered, grabbing his bag and camera equipment. He had made arrangements with a local woman named Mara Petrovic to stay at her house. She was one of the last original residents in the village, according to the email thread. Fluent in English, she had seemed warm and curious about his project. But now, as he walked up the dirt path to her house, lantern in hand, every shadow seemed to move. Every creak of the trees above sounded like a whisper he couldn't quite understand. When he knocked on the wooden door, it opened almost instantly. "You're late," said the woman. Tall, gray-haired, with a face that had clearly seen many winters, Mara was wrapped in a heavy shawl and held a kerosene lamp. "Sorry. The roads. They always get lost. Or something gets in their way. Come inside." Ryan followed her into a dimly lit hallway. The scent of pine and something musky filled the air. Everything looked old but cared for. The kind of home that carried memory in its walls. "You didn't see anyone in the village, did you?" she asked. "No, it's deserted." "Not deserted," she said, locking the door behind them. "Just hiding." Ryan wasn't sure what to say. She gestured to a chair by the fireplace and poured him a dark tea that smelled of herbs and earth. He took a sip. Bitter but strangely soothing. "So, you came to find Blagojevic," she said, settling into a creaking chair opposite him. "I came to learn about what happened. To understand what made people believe he came back from the grave." Mara's eyes narrowed. People didn't believe. They knew. He took out his camera, more for comfort than to record. "There's historical documentation. But there's also speculation that the conditions of the burial, the environment, maybe even rabies or plague, could have explained it. Mass panic, hysteria." "Have you been to his grave?" "Not yet. I was hoping you'd show me." She looked at the fire for a long moment. "There's a reason it was buried outside the consecrated cemetery. There's a reason no one talks about it, even 300 years later." Ryan leaned in, now fully alert. "You've seen something, haven't you?" Mara's face darkened. "I've heard things. Screams in the forest. Footsteps on snow when no one is there. A boy went missing last year. Found days later. Skin pale, eyes wide open, like he'd died afraid of something still standing over him. Ryan hesitated, goosebumps rising along his arms. Do you believe he's still out there? I don't believe anything. I know. She stood suddenly and opened a drawer, retrieving an old key with a curved handle. You'll find his grave at the edge of the woods. Through the gate no one dares use. But if you go alone. Despite every instinct telling him this was more than he bargained for, Ryan nodded. I'll go tomorrow. No, you'll go now. While the moon is full. If you want to see the truth, that's when it shows itself. It was madness, or maybe folklore wrapped in ritual. But Ryan had come all this way for the story. He couldn't back down now. He took the key and bundled up. Mara handed him a flashlight, then paused. If you see a man standing near the grave, do not speak to him. Do not look in his eyes. Do not run. Walk away. Slowly. Her words hit him like ice water. Wait, what man? But she was already blowing out the lamps. He left the house and followed the overgrown path lit by a nearly full moon. Snow crunched beneath his boots. Fog curled low to the ground like fingers grasping at his ankles. The gate at the forest's edge appeared suddenly, twisted iron almost consumed by vines. The key turned with a shriek of rust, and Ryan slipped inside. The trees seemed to grow closer together here, limbs twisted unnaturally, as if recoiling from something beneath them. After 20 minutes of trudging through frozen ground, he found it. A sunken plot of earth, surrounded by a crumbling stone ring. No name, no cross, just a mound. He turned on his camera, began recording. This is it. The alleged resting place of Petar Blagojevic, the man who sparked vampire hysteria in 18th century Serbia. He knelt down, brushing snow from the top of the mound. Something glinted. A shard of mirror. No glass. Embedded in the soil. He reached for it, only to freeze. There were footprints in the snow. Fresh ones. Leading up to the grave and stopping there. But none leaving. Sound. Low groan. Not wind. Something else. He stood quickly, flashlight sweeping the trees. Nothing. And movement. Figure. Just at the tree line. Too far to make out details, but unmistakably human. Standing still. Ryan's heart slammed in his chest. The flashlight flickered. He remembered Mara's words. Do not speak to him. Do not look in his eyes. He forced himself to turn, to walk away. Each step was agony. Every instinct screamed to run. The crunching of footsteps behind him started, matching his pace. He didn't dare look back. Only when he passed through the gate again did the footsteps stop. He spun around. Nothing there. The grave. The man. The mirror shard. It was all too much. Back at Mara's she didn't speak. Just took the key and poured him another cup of bitter tea. He couldn't sleep that night. Every creak in the floorboards. Every gust of wind. His mind was wired. Too alive. Too aware. The next morning he checked the footage. The camera had recorded the audio. Crunching steps. Breathing. And, barely audible, a voice whispering his name. Ryan. Not once, but 3 times. He paused the video. Rewound. Listened again. It wasn't his imagination. He looked at the mirror shard he'd taken from the grave, now in his bag. His reflection in it was distorted. Stretched. Not quite right. He turned to ask Mara about it, but she was gone. The house was empty. No dishes. No warmth. No sign she'd ever lived there. His phone had no signal. The car wouldn't start. And outside, the fog had returned, thicker than before, waiting. And somewhere deep in the woods, something ancient had awakened. Ryan didn't remember falling asleep, but he woke up to a pale light seeping through the lace curtains. The fire was cold. The room was silent. He blinked several times, trying to shake off the fog in his mind. His camera sat on the table where he'd left it, but the bag was zipped up. He hadn't zipped it. He sat up slowly, every muscle tense. The house felt different, hollow, like it had been stripped of life. He called out, "Mara!" Nothing. He stood, opened the bedroom door and walked into the kitchen. The firewood basket was gone. The teacup from the night before gone. No photos on the walls. The wooden cross above the doorframe was tilted, like something had brushed past it too hard. He grabbed his jacket and opened the front door. The fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it was worse. Ryan stepped outside and turned toward the only other house nearby, a small, crumbling structure across a patch of dirt road. He knocked on the door. No answer. The windows were boarded shut. He tried 2 other homes. Same result. Eventually, he made his way to the village square. There was a stone well, dry and moss-covered, and a statue worn so smooth he couldn't tell what it had once represented. A sign swung loosely on a rusted chain. Cemetery, 1 kilometer. If Mara was gone, then he needed to keep filming. Keep documenting. He had a mystery now, and that was more than he'd had before. Maybe she had just gone to town. Maybe the village wasn't abandoned, just private. Still, something itched at the back of his brain. Those footsteps. That voice whispering his name. And now, a mirror shard that showed a twisted version of himself. He started walking toward the cemetery. The fog clung to the road like webbing. Trees bent in unnatural curves, as if bowing to some invisible force. Crows circled high above but never landed. It took him longer than expected to reach the cemetery. When he arrived, the iron gate was locked with a fresh chain. That didn't make sense. Mara had said Blagojevic was buried outside the cemetery, but someone had locked it recently. Someone who didn't want anyone going in or perhaps out. Ryan walked the perimeter and found a break in the stone wall where ivy had overtaken everything. He climbed over, careful not to snag his camera strap. The cemetery was small. No more than 30 headstones, most of them too worn to read. He panned his camera slowly, narrating his findings. Then, near the back, he spotted something odd. A headstone that had been shattered. Not aged but broken, as if crushed under something heavy. The ground around it was sunken in, as if the grave had partially collapsed. He stepped closer. There were markings on the stone. Not letters, symbols. Deeply carved into the fragments like claws had scraped them. His breath fogged the air as he leaned down and brushed away some soil. Crunch. He froze. That wasn't soil. It was a tooth. Human. Then the smell hit him. Okay. Not old. Recent. He stumbled back and looked around. No birds. No wind. But something was watching. He felt it. The way the hairs on his neck stood. The way his chest tightened like prey sensing a predator. And then a sound like bone dragging against stone. He ran. Climbed back over the wall, slipped once, dirt smearing his jeans, and sprinted back down the road toward Mara's house. When he got there, the door was open. Inside, the fire was lit again. And Mara was sitting at the table. He froze. "I thought you left," he said, voice tight. She looked up, face pale, eyes hollow. "I did." He didn't understand. "You were gone. Everything was empty." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You weren't supposed to open the grave." "I didn't open it." "You did. You took something from it." "The mirror shard." She nodded slowly. "It's not just glass. It was buried with him. Binds. Reflects not what you are, but what he is through you." "I don't understand." "You will. Tonight." She stood and walked into the hallway, but when he followed, she was gone again. The hall was pitch black. No doors. No light. Just wall. He backed up, heart racing, and turned around to find the mirror shard lying on the table. But it had changed. Instead of his distorted reflection, he saw a forest, and a figure, standing at the grave, watching. The mirror suddenly cracked down the center. Ryan recoiled. This wasn't folklore. This was something else. Something worse. He needed help. He grabbed his phone again. No signal. But maybe if he drove far enough out. He jumped into the rental car and turned the ignition. Nothing. He tried again. A weak click. Then silence. In the mirror he saw movement. A shape darting behind the car. He threw open the door and looked. Nothing. Then something cold touched his neck. He spun. Nothing. Not even wind. He grabbed his gear and sprinted into the woods, trying to get back to the main road. Maybe he could flag someone down. Maybe. But the road was gone. He turned full circle. There was no path. No village. Just trees. And mist. He picked a direction and ran, crashing through branches, lungs burning. The fog thinned slightly, and he saw a clearing up ahead. He reached it and stopped dead. It was the grave. Again. No matter which way he went, he ended up here. He fell to his knees, gasping. Then he saw the footprints, leading to the mound. And another set, barefoot, leading behind him. He turned slowly. Figure stood 10 feet away. Eyes glowing faintly. It didn't move. It didn't speak. Just stared. Ryan's legs refused to work. The figure took a step forward. Then another. He forced himself to stand, backing away slowly. The figure stopped. Ryan pulled out the mirror shard from his pocket and held it up. The figure was gone. But in the mirror it stood inches away. He screamed and dropped the glass. The wind picked up violently, tearing through the trees. He turned and ran. And then, he woke up, in bed. At Mara's house. Sunlight streamed through the window. His heart pounded like a drum. Had to be a dream. A nightmare. He rushed to his bag. The mirror shard was gone. But his camera. The footage was there. Everything. The footsteps. The grave. The figure. None of it was a dream. He looked outside. A man stood at the edge of the village square, watching him. He blinked, and the man was gone. He turned back toward the house and found Mara standing in the kitchen, boiling water like nothing had happened. "I saw him again," Ryan whispered. She didn't look at him. "You let him in. Now he won't leave." "I didn't let anything in. You broke the seal. Took what was meant to stay buried." Ryan's hand shook. "I need to leave." "You can't. Not until you understand." "Understand what?" She finally met his eyes. "That it's not him who's haunting the village." He frowned. "Then what is?" "It's you. You're the key. You carry him now." He staggered back. "No. That's not possible. You'll see tonight. When the moon turns red." The wind slammed against the windows. And in the reflection of the glass, Ryan didn't see himself anymore. He saw Blagojevic. Smiling, Ryan sat still for a long time, staring into the reflection that wasn't his. Blagojevic's face, ancient, pale and smiling with thin lips, stared back at him from the dark window. It wasn't possible. Couldn't be real. He blinked hard. Once. Then, like smoke clearing, the reflection changed back to his own face, pale and terrified. He backed away from the window, hands trembling. Mara had vanished again like the last time. The boiling kettle no longer whistled. The air inside the house had chilled. Ryan picked up his camera and checked the footage again. Nothing unusual. Just the footage of the grave and the forest. But when he played the audio backward, on a whim out of desperation, he heard the same whisper. "Ryan! Bring him back." He turned off the camera and ran outside. The village was still silent, still empty. The sky was a pale, icy blue, and snow had begun falling again, soft and steady. His car wouldn't start. Again. It was dead. No lights, no power, nothing. He grabbed his backpack, stuffed the camera and batteries inside, and decided to walk. If he could make it to the next town, maybe 5 or 10 miles away, he could call someone. Maybe even the embassy. But deep down he already knew. This place wouldn't let him leave. The road out of Kisilova curved around the forest's edge. Snow crunched beneath his boots. The landscape stretched endlessly, but no matter how far he walked, the village never seemed to disappear behind him. When he turned to check, it was always there. Always close. He picked up his pace. An hour passed. The forest thickened. The road should have led him to the next town by now, but there was nothing. No signs. No power lines. Just endless cold. Then he heard it. The step. Not his. He stopped. The footsteps stopped. He turned around. Empty road. He walked again. Faster. The steps returned, this time closer. He broke into a run. The snow fell harder. The wind picked up. The trees on either side leaned inward unnaturally, as if the forest itself were closing in. Then, another clearing. The same one. The grave. Again. It was like a curse looping over and over. He collapsed to his knees, panting, screaming into the air, into the fog, into the silence. I don't want this. But there was no reply. Just the wind. Then, voice. Want. What? Came from behind him. Cold. Mused. He didn't turn. I know what you are, Ryan said. You're not real. Neither are you anymore, the voice replied. A shadow fell across the snow. Ryan turned. But there was nothing there. Just the grave. The open earth. And a shovel lying beside it. Freshly disturbed soil told him the grave had been dug up again. But this time the coffin was open. Me. He reached out, staring at the dirt, when something caught his eye. A mirror shard. Another one. This one still intact. It lay at the bottom of the coffin. He climbed in and picked it up. His reflection stared back at him. Only it wasn't alone. Behind him, in the reflection, a figure stood. Man. Bill. It's hollow. Ryan whirled around. Empty graveyard. No one there. He climbed out quickly and pocketed the shard. From the trees, a voice called out. You're not who you were. He ran again. But this time, the path didn't lead back to the village. It led to something new. An old church, half collapsed, its steeple broken and buried under snow. He stepped inside cautiously, his breath rising in the frigid air. Candles burned on the altar, dozens of them. And above the altar hung a crude painting of a man with eyes scratched out and a stake through his heart. Blood dripped from the canvas as if freshly painted. Ryan turned, ready to leave, when he saw her. A girl no older than 17, wearing a white nightgown, barefoot in the snow. She stood near the pews, watching him with glassy eyes. He froze. Who are you? He whispered. She didn't speak, just pointed to the altar. He stepped toward it, unsure why, drawn like a moth to a flame. There on the altar lay a journal, bound in cracked leather, covered in dust and dried blood. He picked it up. Inside, the first page was written in English. Journal of Father Dusan Milinkovic, 1725. Witness to the curse. He flipped through page after page, most too faded to read. But one entry caught his eye. He rose not because he was evil, but because he was made into something else. The mirror was the prison, the shard's keys. To destroy him is not to kill him, but to reflect him fully in all his horror. Below the passage was a symbol, a circle with 3 marks through it. The same symbol he had seen carved on the broken gravestone. Ryan closed the book and turned to ask the girl what it meant. But she was gone. Again. The candles had gone out. And now, from the darkness of the church, he heard movement. Low. Deliberate. He backed out, stepping into the snow, his breath a storm in the cold. Then screaming. Not far off. It was a man's voice. He turned and ran toward it, crashing through underbrush and frozen branches until he reached a cabin. Smoke curled from the chimney. He banged on the door. Hello. Is someone there? The door creaked open. A man with a lined face and tired eyes stood in the doorway, holding a rifle. You shouldn't be here, the man said in broken English. I need help. I've been stuck in Kisilova, the village. Something's wrong. The man nodded slowly, motioning for him to come inside. The warmth of the fireplace hit Ryan like a wave. He collapsed into a chair as the man handed him a mug of something steaming and strong. My name is Luca, the man said. You saw the grave. Ryan nodded. Then he knows you. Ryan's hands trembled as he took a sip. What is he? Luca stared into the fire. A soul that should never have returned. A man cursed by those who feared him, buried alive and forgotten. But curses rot, and now he rots the land. He's not dead. Not in the way we understand. His body died. But his will stayed behind. Anchored by the mirrors. By the fear. Then how do I stop it? You don't. Not alone. Luca pulled a bundle of cloth from a cabinet and unwrapped it. Inside were more mirror shards. Dozens. They were hidden. Scattered by those who survived him the first time. You've started collecting them. That's how it begins. Ryan stood pacing. I didn't mean to. I was just filming a story. You are the story now, Luca said quietly. Then help me finish it. Luca looked up. There's one final shard. The heart glass. Buried beneath the roots of the oldest tree in the forest. Find it. Break it. And you may trap him again. What happens if I fail? Luca didn't answer. Instead he handed him an old map. Go at first light. And don't listen to him. No matter what he says. Ryan stayed in the cabin that night, but sleep never came. He watched the mirror shard in his pocket. It pulsed faintly, as if alive. At midnight it showed him something new. Mura. She was chained to a stone slab in a cold, underground chamber. Her mouth moved, whispering, "Help me." Ryan touched the glass. Blagojevic appeared behind her. He smiled. And then the shard cracked. To be continued. The sky was still dark when Ryan left Luca's cabin, armed with the old map and a heavy scarf wrapped tight around his neck. The forest ahead looked different now. Not just eerie but ancient, almost sentient. It felt like the trees were watching, leaning closer the deeper he walked. Every twig snap echoed louder than it should, and every gust of wind carried with it a whisper just beyond his comprehension. He followed the map carefully, counting the landmarks Luca had pointed out the night before. First, the crooked birch tree that split in two like open arms. Then, the shallow brook that hadn't frozen, even in this brutal cold. Finally, the charred stone pillar, blackened from fire, yet no sign of recent burns. The trail beyond that was treacherous. The snow thickened, swallowing his boots up to the ankle. The air grew colder the further he hiked, until every breath stung and his eyelashes frosted. But he pressed on, clutching the bundle of mirror shards Luca had given him. 5 pieces, each cold to the touch, each more unstable with every hour that passed. The final one, the heart glass, waited at the tree of roots. He found it in a clearing just after dawn. The ancient tree was enormous, its trunk twisted with gnarled bark, black and gray like dried blood. Thick roots erupted from the earth, forming a nest of tangled limbs that coiled outward in all directions. Snow didn't seem to stick to it. The ground beneath it was bare, muddy, breathing. He stepped cautiously toward it, camera rolling. This is it, the root tree. According to the legend, the final shard is buried beneath it. The mirror shards in his coat pocket began to hum softly, not sound vibration. Like they recognized they were near their kin. Ryan knelt and began digging with his gloves, pulling away frozen clumps of earth and tangled roots. Minutes passed, then an hour. Just as he began to wonder if Luca had been wrong, his fingers struck something hard. Glass. He uncovered it slowly, brushing off dirt to reveal a large palm-sized shard. The surface shimmered unnaturally, like moonlight on water, despite the rising sun above. But when he touched it, the forest fell silent. The wind stopped. Birds vanished. Even the crunch of his own breath seemed to mute. He held the heart glass up, and it reflected the clearing behind him. Only now, in the mirror's eye, the forest was burning. Flames consumed the trees. Screams echoed from unseen sources. The sky above swirled with red clouds. And standing at the base of the ancient tree in the reflection was Blagojevic. His mouth didn't move, but Ryan heard him anyway. You brought them all together. Good. Ryan dropped the shard. It didn't break. It simply rested at his feet, pulsing faintly like a living heart. Then the earth beneath the tree split open. A low, grinding noise shook the clearing, and from the roots, a staircase of stone emerged, twisting downward into darkness. Ryan stared in disbelief. He knew what he had to do. He picked up the heart glass, secured it in his pack with the others, and stepped down into the abyss. The air grew warm immediately, damp and suffocating. The walls dripped with moisture. Mold clung to every crevice. Old torches lined the spiral stairwell, unlit, their wicks rotten. As he descended, he heard voices. Not just one. Dozens. Hundreds. All whispering. Some screamed. Some pleaded. Others simply chanted. Ryan reached the bottom and entered a wide, circular chamber. In the center stood a stone altar, glowing faintly from within. Chains ran from each corner, extending out of view. On the altar, Mara. Her wrists and ankles were bound in rusted manacles, her body limp, breathing shallow. He ran to her, heart pounding. Mara, can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. I'm here to end this. I have the shards. She shook her head weakly. You brought them too close. He's almost whole again. A sound echoed through the chamber. Slow footsteps. What? Ryan turned toward the sound, and from the shadows emerged Blagojevic. Not a phantom now. Not a reflection. Fully formed. He was tall and gaunt, skin stretched like parchment over bone. His eyes glowed faintly, but it was his smile that chilled Ryan the most. It wasn't predatory. It was amused. Finally, the thing said. The vessel arrives. Ryan backed away, heart hammering. You're not real. You're just a cursed memory. I was, Blagojevic said. Until you called me. You with your camera. Your curiosity. Your belief. I don't believe in you. You do now. Blagojevic raised his hand and Ryan was thrown backward into the wall. The wind knocked out of him. The camera shattered on the ground. You carry the pieces, the creature said, walking toward the altar. You were chosen the moment you touched the first shard. Soul fractured. Like mine. Now give me the heart glass. Ryan struggled to his feet, clutching his bag. No. Blagojevic tilted his head. You think you can stop me? You are no priest. No hunter. You are a storyteller. And your story ends here. Ryan pulled the heart glass from the bag. The moment he did, the other shards began to float, circling the chamber, vibrating violently. You're right, Ryan said. I'm not a priest. He threw the heart glass onto the altar. Crack. A scream echoed. Not from Mara, not from Ryan, but from Blagojevic. Chamber shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Mara's chains shattered. No! The creature roared, lunging forward. But Mara was already off the altar, grabbing the shards midair. They spun around her, forming a halo of broken glass. I bound you once, she said, her voice rising. I will do it again. Blagojevic snarled, lunging for her, but the shards pierced his form, each one embedding itself into his skin with a flash of light. He screamed, collapsing to his knees. Mara stepped forward, the heart glass now glowing white-hot in her hands. Return to the mirror, she said, pressing it to his chest. There was a blinding flash, and then silence. Blagojevic was gone. The shards fell to the floor. Ryan gasped for breath, chest heaving. Mara turned to him, face pale, eyes wide. It's not over. What do you mean? The shards can only contain him, not destroy him. Not yet. Then what do we do? She looked toward the ceiling, toward the world above. We bury them. Far apart. Forever. Ryan nodded, still shaking. I'll take one. She nodded. I'll take another. The others, Luca. The others who remained hidden. They would know what to do. Together they climbed the stairs, emerging into the cold light of day. The tree was still there, but the ground had closed. No sign of the passage. No sound. The forest had gone quiet again. Ryan looked at Mara. "Who are you?" She smiled faintly. "Someone who's lived too many lives. One more won't hurt." They parted ways at the village. Ryan took the road west. She disappeared into the forest. As he walked, the fog lifted. For the first time in days he saw the sun. But in his coat pocket, the shard still pulsed. Not with malice, but with memory. To be continued. The silence in the village was heavier than ever before. Not a single bird chirped, not a single dog barked, and even the wind held its breath. Owen stepped out of the ruins of the chapel with Helena beside him. Her face was pale, eyes scanning every inch of the shadows as if expecting something to lunge out of the darkness. Behind them, the once forgotten underground tomb now sat exposed to the open air, the stone lid shattered in pieces. The rotten smell of centuries-old death still lingered in the breeze, mixed with something more metallic, something fresher. Owen glanced at his phone, but the screen was still dead. No signal, no battery, no use. Time seemed irrelevant here anyway. Night had fallen fast, unnaturally so, and the moon glowed sickly behind a veil of drifting clouds. He turned to Helena. "We need to finish this," he said. His voice steady despite the dread creeping into his bones. "Before he finishes us." Helena nodded. "The book said the ritual must be completed during the blackest part of night," she said, clutching the worn grimoire they had retrieved from the chapel's catacombs. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing the page with the final rites, words scribbled in an ancient Slavic tongue neither of them understood. But they had the translation written in Owen's notebook, the one he'd hidden beneath his shirt ever since they arrived. They returned to the gravesite just outside the village where the legend said Petar Blagojevic had first been buried. The earth was still loose from when it had been disturbed weeks ago. Bones lay scattered in unnatural positions, as though something had clawed its way out rather than been buried in. Around the perimeter of the grave they placed the remaining relics, the cross forged from a lightning-struck tree, the silver bell taken from the ruined monastery, and the bloodstone pendant Helena had retrieved from her grandmother's locked chest in the attic. "I can feel him watching," Helena whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the rustling trees, though none of the branches moved. "He's here." Owen lit the final candle and placed it in the center of the grave. "Then let him watch," he said. "Because we're ending this tonight." The air thickened as Helena began reading the incantation. Her voice trembled at first but grew more confident with each word. The ground beneath them vibrated faintly. Owen stood guard with the iron blade in his hands, eyes darting to every shadow. A low growl echoed from the woods. Not a dog, not a wolf. It was something else entirely. Something not born of flesh but of hate. "Keep reading," Owen barked. The growl became a roar, and from the trees came the shape they had feared most. Petar Blagojevic. But he was no longer just a man. His body was stretched, distorted like skin pulled over smoke. His eyes glowed red with fury, mouth filled with too many teeth. His hands were claws, and his face was almost human, but not quite. He didn't charge. He floated toward them. Helena's voice wavered. "Don't stop," Owen yelled, moving between her and the creature. The vampire let out a bone-rattling scream, and Owen's ears rang. He stumbled but kept the blade steady. Petar lunged, and Owen swung the sword. It made contact, but instead of cutting flesh it passed through shadow. Petar vanished into smoke, then reappeared behind them. Helena screamed. Owen turned just in time to block another lunge. The relics around the grave began to glow faintly. "The ritual, it's working," Helena cried out, continuing the incantation louder now, yelling the ancient words into the wind. Petar shrieked again, covering his ears. His form flickered, unstable. Owen used the distraction to stab at him, but again the blade passed through air. Suddenly, the grave itself cracked open, and a blinding light poured from it, shooting up like a pillar into the sky. The vampire roared, clutching his chest. Helena finished the final line. Everything stopped. Petar screamed a scream so shrill and unnatural it pierced the clouds themselves. His body twisted in the light, pulled backward toward the grave. He clawed at the air, shrieking, "No! You don't understand. I was protecting them. I was." And then he was gone. The light vanished. The earth slammed shut. The candle went out. Silence. Owen dropped to his knees, breathing heavily. Helena was crying softly, not from sadness but release. The weight that had been on her shoulders since her family sent her that cryptic letter now lifted like morning fog. "Is it over?" she asked after a long pause. Owen looked around. The night was still. The air no longer felt heavy. His phone lit up suddenly, full signal. Notifications began pouring in. The normal world had returned. They gathered the relics and slowly made their way back to the village. Strangely, the buildings looked newer. Not modern but no longer broken and decayed. As if time had reversed the damage. "What's happening?" Owen asked aloud. An old man stood near the edge of the road, smiling at them. "Thank you," he said simply. "You released us." Before either could speak, he faded away like smoke. They stood in stunned silence. Around them, figures began to appear. Not people of flesh and blood, but echoes of the past. Villagers who had once lived in fear of Petar. They looked peaceful now. Children laughed. Lanterns glowed. Music drifted faintly in the breeze. And then, as if the village had never existed, everything faded away. Owen and Helena were alone on a grassy hill with no signs of ruins, no signs of buildings, no signs of death. Only the stars above and the soft chirp of crickets. Helena turned to him. "Did we break the curse?" "I think we did," Owen whispered. But deep in the forest, behind the ancient trees, something still stirred. A shadow detached itself from a tree and watched them walk away. Not all stories end cleanly. But miracles, even in horror, still exist. The night was unrelenting, a suffocating darkness that pressed in on every side as Matthew and Alira stepped cautiously into the ruined catacombs beneath the church ruins. The air smelled of damp earth and something fouler. Decay, old blood, secrets left buried for centuries. The beam from Matthew's flashlight quivered, his hand trembling with adrenaline as it scanned the mossy stone walls etched with symbols older than the town above them. They were now far beyond where Alira's great-grandfather's journal had ever described. Whatever lay ahead was undocumented, erased from history or never known at all. Only the whispers of villagers, half-mad from fear, had dared hint at what might be found in the crypt below the original altar. Matthew felt it before he saw it, a presence so ancient, so aware, that it felt like a second pulse vibrating in the marrow of his bones. At the far end of the corridor, a stone door stood cracked open. Red light flickered from within, casting a moving glow that danced like fire but had no source. The pair stepped inside, finding a circular chamber ringed with carved stone coffins, each sealed tight except one. The center of the chamber was hollowed out, revealing a deep, circular pit where chains dangled loosely, rusted but intact. Alira moved closer, gasping softly. At the base of the pit was a body. No, not just a body, but him. Petar Blagojevic. He was still there, lying in a mummified state, skin like leather stretched tight across bones, mouth twisted into a grin that had never decayed. Yet his eyes, those were wrong. Open. Alive. Watching. Matthew took a shaky step back. "He's not dead." Alira's hand gripped his arm. "This is where they trapped him. The townspeople in 1725. The priest sealed him here, not dead, not alive. Waiting." A sound echoed through the chamber, something dragging across stone above. They were no longer alone. Matthew raised the flashlight to the archway, but it flickered violently and died, plunging them into sudden red gloom. From behind the walls, a heartbeat pulsed. Low. Measured. Not theirs. Then Petar moved. His limbs twitched first, as if remembering how to move. Then his head turned with a creaking sound like splitting wood. He rose unnaturally, as though pulled by invisible strings, until he was standing at the edge of the pit, hovering inches from Alira. She froze, staring into those dark eyes. "You bear her blood," Petar whispered, voice like dried leaves rustling in wind. "You are the last." Matthew shouted and stepped in front, brandishing the ancient crucifix they had taken from the altar ruins above. It burned with a strange heat in his hand, though no light came from it. Petar recoiled, not from the cross but from Matthew. "It's not you," he whispered, voice uncertain now. "It's him." Alira looked between them. "What are you talking about?" "The prophecy," Petar hissed. "The blood that cursed me. And the blood that can undo it." Suddenly the chamber trembled. From beneath the stone coffins, claws erupted. Decomposing hands pushed lids aside as figures dragged themselves from their centuries-long slumber. As glowing teeth sharp. They were the others. Victims. Followers. Cursed like him. Alira backed against the wall. "We're going to die down here." "No," Matthew said, voice distant, as if realizing something profound. "We're going to end this." He reached into his jacket, pulling out the relic Alira had insisted on bringing, the vial of water from the consecrated spring mentioned in the journal. The water her great-grandfather had believed could purify what the church never could. Petar lunged at him, but Matthew shattered the vial on the floor between them. The effect was immediate. A blinding white light exploded outward, slamming Petar and the creatures into the walls like rag dolls. Screams erupted from the risen dead, not of pain but release. Dust filled the air. The chamber buckled, stones splitting and ceiling cracking as the walls collapsed inward. Matthew grabbed Alira. "Run!" They sprinted back through the tunnels as behind them, the crypt caved in. The cries of the undead faded into silence, buried at last beneath rock and faith. By the time they emerged into the cold dawn, the sun was rising, its warmth no longer a threat to the village. Back in town, the transformation was immediate. The wellspring that had run dry for decades now gushed clear water. The sick rose from their beds. The dead stayed in their graves. Locals gathered outside, staring at the two as if they were gods or ghosts. An old woman approached, tears in her eyes. "The darkness, it's gone. We felt it. You brought the light back." Matthew looked at Alira. Her face was dirty, cut from the collapse, but her eyes shone with something he hadn't seen before: peace, purpose. "Your family protected this secret for generations," he said. "You just finished what they started." They left later that week, the townsfolk refusing to let them go without a feast in their honor. Songs were sung. A statue was planned. And the church that had crumbled long ago, its ruins would be rebuilt, not as a house of fear, but as a monument to salvation. On the plane home, Matthew opened his laptop. A new video project. One last entry into the journal of his investigations. The vampire who waited 300 years, and the miracle that freed him. He looked at Alira, sleeping beside him, her hand in his. He smiled. Some stories don't end with horror. Some end with redemption. And the world needs both.